Page 404, Chapter 8, American and Other Non-British Literatures. American Literature. The literature of the United States of America is written in the English language, which bears the stamp of the American nationality, ethos, and sensibility. The language, too, has been transformed in order to give expression to typical American sentiments and environment. Hence, it is American literature written in American English. Para. The first man from Western Europe who wrote home about his adventures was Columbus, whose famous letter 1493, quote, sets the form and the point in view of the earliest American literature, unquote, stop, para. Much of the writing of early settlers and explorers like William Bradford's of Plymouth, Plimoth Plantation, 1630, first published in 1856, has only historical significance. There was hardly any literature during the colonial period in American history, which extends from 1607 to 1756. Great literature is often the result of a sense of oneness, of a spirit of nationality, which the heterogeneous settlers of America were yet to feel. It was by the end of the colonial period that the colonies of the Atlantic seaboard were united together by, quote, the great religious, political, and intellectual revolution that moved from the Renaissance and the Reformation into the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason, unquote, stop. It was the beginning of American nationalism which created an atmosphere conducive to the production of authentic literature. Para. Most of the early writing in America was about religion and politics. During the 17th century, the sermons and theological discourses of the Puritans were predominant. The 18th century was dominated by political tracts and essays that record the struggle of American settlers towards revolution, independence, and a democratic form of government. There is little literary art in these writings, quote, but it does reveal the ideological development of the country in its formative period, stop. Moreover, the forces at work during these years played an important part in the shaping of the American character and in the literary expression of the later poets, novelists and essayists, stop, unquote. Para. The political writings which deserve mention are Thomas Paine's pamphlet called Common Sense, 1776. The first published utterance for complete political independence, and Thomas Jefferson's The Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776. July 4, 1776. It still remains a classic in American prose. In 1778, the federal Constitution was ratified. Professor Spiller, Spiller, remarks about the writings of 17th and 18th centuries, quote, from the religious and political debates on how life should be lived and how a society should be constructed were fashioned a nation and a way of life, stop, unquote, para. The literary efforts from the colonial period to the late 18th century were negligible. The B.A.Y. Psalm, Psalm book, one of the earliest works in the ballad meter, was composed by Thomas Weld, W-E-L-D, John Eliot, and Richard Mather, Mather. Anne Bradstreet, 1612 to 1672, was the first Puritan woman poet. Michael Wigglesworth, Wigglesworth, 1631 to 1705, is remembered for his poem The Day of Doom. Thomas Godfrey, 1736 to 1773, is remembered for his play The Prince of Parthia, 1759, and 2 volumes of poetry. The Court of Fancy and Juvenile Poems. Edward Taylor, 1645 to 1722, was an important poet of the colonial period. His poems, which are metaphysical in nature, were published in 1937. Holy Robes for Glory, The Glory and Grace in the Church Set Out, and The Experience are his memorable poems. Page 405. The classicist epics of Timothy Dwight, Dwight, Joel Barlow, and other, quote, Hartford Wheats, unquote, have little poetic significance. Philip Feneau, Freneau, was a gifted lyricist. W. H. Brown's The Power of Sympathy, 1789, is the first American novel. Other novels written during this period imitated British sentimental fiction of the 18th century. H. H. Brackenbridge's Brackenbridge, Modern Chivalry, 1790, is a lively work dealing satirically with American political and social conditions. 19th century American literature. Early American writers imitated European models and did not exhibit any national quality. Gradually, they cultivated genuinely American character. 18th century classicism influenced the early American writers. During the 19th century, main European influence on American literature was Romanticism. Romanticism in early American literature is individualistic and optimistic. Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman were influenced by the romantic doctrines of individualism. Some writers like Poe, Poe, Hawthorne, and Melville had little faith in the possibilities of social reform or in man's capacity to dispense with external authority. Henry B. Parks writes, they were concerned, in particular, with the problem of isolation, which may be regarded as individualism of American society in bright or dark colors, unquote, stop. However, all these writers were primarily engaged, in exploring the implications of American doctrine of individualism in the light of the romantic conceptions of human personality. During the 19th century, all important genres of literature, non-fiction, fiction, poetry, and drama emerged. Fiction and poetry marked a remarkable development. Fiction. Charles Brogden, Brockden Brown, 1771 to 1810, was the first American writer, to make a profession of literature and the first to approach the status of a major novelist, unquote, His main works are Wieland, Wieland, 1798, Ormond, Ormond, 1799, Arthur Morvine, 1799 to 1800, Edgar Huntley, 1799, and Clara Howard, 1801. He was influenced by the Gothic novel of England and, quote, the more exotic aspects of European romanticism, unquote, stop. His novels are full of horror caused by the addiction of his characters to weird, weird, crimes or sufferings from various forms of neurosis and insanity. He is, quote, the first professional American novelist, unquote, who has, quote, shown such a penchant for the darker aspects of human psyche, unquote, stop. This trend was developed by Poe and has remained the dominant characteristic of American fiction down to the present. Para. Washington Irving, Irving, 1783 to 1859, is, in the words of Marcus Cunliffe, Cunliff, quote, the first man of letters from the United States to win an international reputation, unquote, stop. He was a versatile writer. His Life of Columbus, Life of Goldsmith, Life of Washington, and Chronicle of the Conquest of Granada show his mastery of the unique biographical and historical writing. Salman Gundi is a collection of essays. He is best remembered for his short stories, which appeared in the sketchbook of Geoffrey Gayon, Gayon, Gent, Gent, Bracebridge Hall, and Tales of Traveller. Para. James Fenimore, Fenimore, Cooper, Cooper, 1789 to 1851, wrote his first novel, Precavtion, Precavtion, to please his wife. Between 1820 and 1826, he wrote many romantic novels. The Spy, 1821, The Pioneers, 1823, The Pilot, 1824, Lionel Lincoln, Lincoln, 1825, The Last of the Mohicans, Mohicans, 1826, The Pathfinder, The Deer Slayer, and the Little Page trilogy, consisting of Satin Stowe, Stoe, The Chain Bearer, The Redskins. The trilogy deals with his social philosophy. He is a talented storyteller. Natty, Natty Bumppo, Bumppo, the famous Leatherstocking, is a narrator in his 5 novels known as Leatherstocking Tales. Cooper also wrote on history and criticism in A Letter to His Countrymen, 1834, Gleanings in Europe, 1837 to 38, Homeward Bound, 1838, The American Democrat and the History of the Navy of the United States, para. Edgar Allan Poe, 1809 to 1849, a man of versatile genius and achievements, was a critic, short story writer, and poet. He was the first aesthetic critic in American literature, propounded the definition of short story, which had hitherto no definite and exact technique, and for the first time defined poetry as a short composition which excites the soul. The Poetic Principle, The Philosophy of Composition, and the Review of Hawthorne's Twice Told Tales express Poe's views on poetry and short story, para. Poe was a great poet in 19th century. W.B. Yeats declared that Poe was, quote, always and for all lands, a great lyric poet, unquote, stop. His poems appeared in 1831. Some of his poems are To Helen, Israfel, Israfel, The City in the Seas, and The Raven, Raven. Eureka is a prose poem. His poems are the expression of, quote, supernal beauty, unquote, stop. They are true to his definition of poetry as, quote, the rhythmical creation of beauty, unquote, stop, page 406. Para. Poe was the creator of the short story in literature. With the publication of his Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, 1840, he stormed into popularity. His famous tales are Berenice, Berenice, Morella, Morella, Ligeria, Ligeria, The Black Cat, The Oval Portrait, The Oval Portrait, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, MS Found in a Bottle, William Wilson, The Man in the Crowd, The Telltale, TELL-TALE, Heart, The Mosque of the Red Death, The Balloon Hoax, King Pest, Hop-Frog, The Cask of Amontillado, Amontillado, and many more. Poe's tales of the arabesque and grotesque are noticeable for the wide diversity of subject, thought, and especially tone and manner of handling. He was a great and gifted technician and craftsman who molded each tale artistically in order to develop a different effect, and he succeeded. Para. Poe's tales of mystery and ratiocination, Ratiocination, anticipated the rise of detective fiction and science fiction. Poe, in his three tales of mystery and ratiocination, The Murders in the Pew, P-U-E morgue, first published in Graham's Magazine in April 1841, The Purloined Letter and the Mystery of Marie Roget, created the theory and practice of detective fiction. The Gold Bug, 1813, also has an abiding detective interest. Some of his famous tales of mystery and ratiocination, The Unparalleled Adventure of One Hans Pfaall, Pfaall, The Balloon Hoax, The Facts in Case of M. Valdemar, Mesmeric Revelation, and von Kempler and his Discovery, anticipated science fiction. In fact, Poe invented, quote, the science of fiction till, unquote, stop. Para. Poe's influence on literature has been enormous. Writers widely divergent both in nature and in technique, Oscar Wilde, R.L. Stevenson, Ambrose Bierce, H.P. Lovecraft, Hemingway, Faulkner, A.G. Wells, Jules Verne, Asimov, A.G. Doyle. I think it should be A.C. Doyle, Arthur Conan Doyle, G.K. Chesterton, Agatha Christie, and Nabokov have come under Poe's dominant and ineffaceable influence. Para. Nathaniel Hawthorne, 1804-1864, had an admirable talent for symbolism and a serious interest in historical fidelity, psychological truth, and social order. His first work, Fanshawe, F-A-N-S-H-A-W-E, 1828, is a romance imitative of Sir Walter Scott. His first four stories, The Gentle Boy, Major Molyneux, Molineux, Roger Malouin's Burial, and The Wives of the Dead, appeared in Annwal, Annwal, Miscellany, Miscellany in 1832. He wrote over 100 stories, most of which were first published anonymously in magazines and subsequently collected in the Twice Told Tales, 1837, enlarged edition, 1842, Moses from the Old House, and The Snow Image and Other Tales, 1852. Some of his outstanding stories are Young Goodman Brown, The Minister's Black Veil, The Birthmark, Ethan Brand, and The Artist of the Beautiful. Para. Hawthorne's famous novels are The Scarlet Letter, 1850, his masterpiece, which is set in 17th century Salem at the height of Puritan theocracy, and which is considered the first psychological novel in American literature. The House of the Seven Gables, 1851, set in 19th century Salem, suggests through characters of Maule, Maule, and Colonel Pynchon, Pynchon, that, quote, wrongdoing, of one generation leaves into the successive ones, unquote, semicolon. The Blythe-Dale, Blythdale romance, 1852, based on humanism and transcendentalism, and The Marble Faun, Faun, 1860, or The Transformation in the English edition, which is set in 19th century Italy, dramatizes in new perspective the effects of sin, guilt, and suffering. Para. Hawthorne's books for children and other works include Grandfather's Chair, 1841, The Wonder Book for Girls and Boys, 1851, Tanglewood Tales, 1853, and The Life of Franklin Pierce, 1852. Septimus Felton and Dr. Grimshaw's Secret, written in 1861 and 1863, were posthumously published. Para. Commenting on Hawthorne's achievement, T.S. Eliot remarks, quote, Hawthorne's observation of moral life in The Scarlet Letter, in The House of Seven Gables, and even in some of the tales and sketches, has solidity, has permanence, the permanence of art. The work of Hawthorne is truly a criticism, true because of fidelity of the artist and not a mere conviction of the man, of the Puritan morality, of the transcendental morality, and of the world which Hawthorne knew, stop unquote, para. Herman Melville's 1819 to 1891 reputation, originally established through South Seas romances, now rests mainly on Moby Dick, Billy Budd, and several of his stories. Typee, Typee, 1846, is a semi-autobiographical tale of adventure and romance on an island of South Seas. It extols the virtues of the pure, primitive life and contrasts it with Western society. Omoo, O-M-O-O, 1847, tells the adventures of the same author-hero after his escape from the Typee Valley and his sojourn in Tahiti. Mahdi, 1949, a sequel to Typee and Omoo, eventually focuses on a search through Pacific waters which symbolizes a quest for meaning. Redburn, 1849, is a semi-autobiographical novel, page 407. Moby Dick, 1851, Melville's masterpiece, is an exciting adventure story which presents an account of the New England whaling industry. It is, quote, a psychological study of revenge and monomania, a dramatization of madness. Stop. By the alchemy of his art, Melville transformed this melange into a tragedy, stop unquote. The tragedy emerges from a man's confrontation with the forces of a hostile or indifferent universe. Melville's protagonist, Captain Ahab, has been formed, quote, for the noblest tragedies, stop. His antagonist is Moby Dick, the white whale, quote, monomaniac incarnation of all those malicious agencies which some deep men feel eating in them, comma, till they are left living on with half a heart or half a lung, stop unquote. Ishmael, Ishmel, comma, the narrator plays the role of the survivor on the ship Pequod, Pequud, stop. He is something of a Greek chorus. Moby Dick, quote, is one of the world's greatest novels, comma, whose greatness increases with each new reading, stop unquote, para. Melville's other works are Pierre or the Ambiguities, 1852, Israel Potter, 1855, subtitled His 40 Years of Exile, and The Confidence Man, 1857. Melville's poems were collected in Battle Pieces and Aspects of the War, 1876. Clarel, A Poem and Pilgrimage in Holy Land, 1876. A long narrative poem. John Marr, Some Sea Pieces, 1888, and Timoleon, Timoleon, 1891. Billy Buddy, comma, Foretop Man, Retopman, 1891, are Melville's last novel. Para. Mark Twain, 1835-1910, the first major American author from the Atlantic seaboard states, is, in the words of H.L. Mencken, quote, the true father of our national literature, stop unquote. He was a satirist of human wickedness and folly in all their manifestations. His real name was Samuel Langhorne, Langhorne, Clemens, Clemens. The spelling should be checked. His works include the celebrated Frog of Calaveras Country and Other Sketches, 1867. The Innocents Abroad, or The New Pilgrim's Progress, 1869, a travel book. Roughing It, 1872, a travel book. The Gilded Age, 1874, a romantic novel with political satire. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, 1876, A Tramp Abroad, 1879, a travel book, comma, The Prince and the Pauper, 1880, Life on the Mississippi, 1883, autobiographical accounts of life on the river, comma, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, 1884, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, 1889, The Tragedy of Pudd'nhead Wilson, 1894, Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc, 1896, Following the Equator, 1897, The Man That Corrupted Hadleyburg and Other Stories and Essays, 1900. What is Man? A philosophic dialogue on human predicament, and The Mysterious Stranger, 1916, a bitter fable marked as children's story. Para. Hemingway in The Green Hills of America, 1935, observed, quote, all modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn, unquote, stop. Faulkner said of Twain, quote, all of us, ... are his heirs, stop unquote. T.S. Eliot, summing up his debt of modern writers, observed that Mark Twain, quote, discovered a new way of writing, unquote, dash, quote, a language based on American colloquial speech, unquote, stop. Indeed, he is the first of American writers to draw from the American soil the material for an original and lasting work. Para. Stephen Crane, 1871 to 1900, minutely observed the life of the outcasts and the deprived sections of society. Thus, he gathered raw material for his writings. He hoped to reproduce the familiar scenes with the passionate intensity of a Tolstoy. Crane's, C-R-A-N-E, first novel, Maggie, A Girl in the Street, 1893, published under the pseudonym of Johnston Smith, has been called the first naturalistic American novel. It is about the slums of New York. The Third Violet, 1897, is a semi-autobiographical novel. The Red Badge of Courage, 1895, is Crane's masterpiece. Henry Fleming, the hero of this novel, overcomes his fear and fights his way to self-redemption. His other works are George's Mother, 1896, The Monster, 1899, and Willomville Stories, 1900. His short stories, especially The Open Boat, The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky, his majestic Lie, The Second Generation, An Experiment in Misery, and many others, gave to the naturalistic short story its characteristic form, later to be exploited by Hemingway, Steinbeck, and a host of others, para. Bret Harte, H-A-R-T-E, 1836 to 1902, who wrote condensed novels and other papers, 1867, was a short story writer. His famous story, The Luck of the Roaring Camp, made him immensely popular. His other memorable stories are The Outcasts of Poker Flat and Tennessee Partner. Tenants, T-E-N-N-E-N-C, check print. In his stories, Bret Harte writes about the rough, strange world of the frontier, where he found heroism and nobility in unexpected places. Para. Harriet Beecher Stowe, 1811 to 1896, is an outstanding woman novelist. Her works include The Minister's Wooing, 1859, Uncle Tom's Cabin, a novel on New England life and character, The Pearl of Hours Island, 1862, page 408, Old Town Folks, 1869, The Old Town Fireside Stories, 1872, and Poganuc, P-O-G-A-N-U-C, People, para. William Sidney Porter, known as O. Henry, 1862 to 1910, in literature was undoubtedly the most widely read short story writer of his time. The first collection of his stories, Cabbages and Kings, and other stories depict New York life. Some of his famous stories are The Gift of Magi, The Last Leaf, The Third Ingredient, and The Furnished Room. His stories are remarkable for the abundance of humor, irony, satire, and natural style, which is characterized by colloquialism and slang. His stories give an illuminating understanding of human life. O. Henry enriched American story by virtue of both quality and quantity. Para. Ambrose Bierce published some books under the pseudonym of Dodd Grile, G-R-I-L-E. His works have been collected in 12 volumes. His works include Black Beetles in Amber, 1892, The Monk and the Hangman's Daughter, 1892, In the Midst of Life, originally published as Tales of Soldiers and Civilians, 1891, Can Such Things Be, and The Mockingbird. He was influenced by Poe, but his horrors are more realistically motivated. Dreams, flashbacks, and hallucinations are common in his works. Para. William Dean Howell's 1837 to 1920 represents a change that happens in literary judgment with the passage of time. Hamilton, the place where he lived for a pretty long time, is the background of his two novels, A Boy's Town, 1890, and New Leaf Mills, 1930. His experience as the American consul in Venice provided him with the material for his famous travel book, The Venetian Life, 1866. As a literary journalist, he edited the Atlantic Monthly and the Harper's Magazine. Writers like Stephen Crane, Frank Morris, and Hamlin Garland have acknowledged their indebtedness to him. His other famous works are A Foregone Conclusion, 1875, A Modern Instance, 1882, The Rise of Silas Lapham, and Indian Summer, 1890. Among his non-fiction works, Criticism and Fiction, 1891, My Literary Passion, 1895, Heroines of Fiction, 1910, and My Mark Twain, 1910. He also wrote over 30 one-act plays. His contribution lies in the direction of shifting American literature from romanticism to realism. His novels throw light on many aspects of American life: journalism, medicine, business, religion, and socialism. Para. Henry James, 1843 to 1916, was born and brought up in New York City amidst the atmosphere of affluence and intellectual activity. He was a voluminous writer whose works include novels, short story, and criticism. His most important works are The American, 1877, The Portrait of a Lady, 1881, The Ambassadors, 1903, The Golden Bowl, 1904. His other novels are Roderick Hudson, 1815, Watch and Ward, 1878, The Europeans, 1878, Confidence, 1879, Washington Square, 1880, The Bestonians, 1886, The Princess Casamassima, 1886, The Tragic Muse, 1889, The Other House, 1896, The Spoils of Poynton, Poynton, 1897, The Maissie, Maissie New, 1897, The Awkward Age, 1889, The Sacred Fount, 1901, The Wings of the Dove, 1902, and The Outcry, 1911. His short fiction has been collected under various titles: A Passionate Pilgrim, 1875, The Madonna of the Future, 1879, the author of Beltraffo, 1885, The Aspen Papers, 1888, The Lessons of the Master, 1892, Termination, 1895, Embarrassments, 1896, The Soft Side, 1900, The Better Sort, 1903, and The Finer Grain, 1904. Para. Henry James elaborated his views on the art of fiction in his essays and prefaces. He thought it unfortunate that novel had no, quote, theory, comma, a conviction, comma, a consciousness of itself behind it, ... unquote. He had a high conception of art. Art is not separate from life. According to him, it is, quote, art that makes life, comma, makes interest, comma, makes importance, ... unquote. He enunciated his views on fiction, comma, in The Art of Fiction. Sincerity is essential for fiction. It represents life. A novelist does not copy life. He reinterprets life. The themes of his own novels come from life. A novelist endeavors, quote, to catch the color, comma, the relief, comma, the expression, comma, the surface, comma, the substance of the human spectacle, unquote, stop. The themes of his own novels come from life. Form was of supreme importance to him. He put emphasis on order, design and unity in the technique of fiction writing. He dismissed the distinction between the novel of character and the novel of incident, and also the distinction between the novel and the romance. According to him, there are only good novels and bad novels. His The Art of Fiction is a landmark in the criticism of fiction. Para. James's three early novels, Roderick Hudson, The American, and Daisy Miller, are portraits of Americans as artists, businessmen, and innocents abroad. Christopher Newman is a young businessman who faces the corrupt but intriguing aristocracy of France. The Portrait of a Lady depicts the American's experience abroad, page 409. In it, he revealed his mastery of realistic fictional technique. In his mature novels, The Ambassadors, The Wings of Dove, and The Golden Bowl, James again deals with his familiar theme of confrontation between Americans and Europeans with the more profound perceptions of the comic and tragic aspects of it. James's best fiction, quote, reveals the complex psychological motivations that animate men, the social institutions that mold them, and the moral dilemmas from which they emerge diminished or enhanced, stop, unquote. He is regarded as, quote, one of the greatest writers and most civilized intelligences of modern times, unquote, stop, para. The writers during the second half of the 19th century became conscious of their local life, and they described it in their novels. Novels of local colorists evince a combination of the romantic and the realistic in their novels. Bret Harte, as we have already discussed, was prominent among local colorists. The famous works of the local color movement are Edward Eggleston's Egglestan, 1837 to 1902, The End of the World, The Mystery of Metropolisville, and Hoosier, Hoosier Schoolmaster, Joe Chandler Harris, 1848 to 1908, Brer Rabbit, and other short stories. George W. Cable's 1844 to 1925 stories and the works of Sarah Orne Jewett, Edward Everett Hale, and Mary Freeman. The local color movement served as a useful transition between Romanticism and Realism, and anticipated the more authentic regionalism of the 20th century, of which Steinbeck is the best example.